I think the biggest thing was just the rules that I started creating for myself. So, for example, with like food wise, I was looking up different things about nutrition and wanting to eat really healthy, quote unquote healthy. And then that started becoming rules where I was like, okay, I always have to eat like the whole grain rice or the whole wheat bread, or I can only have, my big thing was like only have dessert like once a month, or like only on the
Mm.
weekends, like making all of these rules that were became so rigid that obviously that didn't feel good, and obviously also those rules created so many negative thoughts in my head.
Well, hi there, and welcome to a See With Me podcast. My name is Hélène, and I am your host. And today, on this very special episode, we're talking about a topic that is very important to me and that should be important to everyone. We're talking about eating disorders. And sitting down with me for this episode is Ali. Ali is an eating disorder recovery coach, and she helps people who are going through and who've been through eating disorders, as she herself has conquered the battle of eating disorders. So it is a topic that I wanted to address since I started the podcast, because it is something that is impacting everyone across genders, across demographic, across socioeconomical status, across generations, whatever the case may be. It is something that a lot of people are going through or have been through, including myself. I had a very bad relationship to food, and I wanted to welcome someone who knows more about it, and I'm so honored that she accepted to sit down with me and talk openly about her own journey with eating disorders and the lesson that she's learned and how she's helping people getting rid of their eating disorders. So yes, it was very enlightening to sit down with her. I love her energy, I love her honesty. I hope that this episode will spark curiosity and self-reflection and awareness within you. If you're listening to that, I hope that you will listen to it with an open mind and an open heart. Take care of yourself, love yourself. Food should be a fuel and not an obsession. And you are worth more than your body. That's what Alice says, right? You are worth more than what you look like and what the amount of exercise that you are doing on a daily or weekly basis. Love yourself. Take care of yourself. And yes, without further ado, please take a seat with Ali. Well, hello.
Hi, how
How
are
are you
you?
doing?
I'm amazing. I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
Me too. I'm excited about this conversation. I've been looking forward to it. I'm so glad that I found you on Instagram because it's the topic that I wanted to talk about, eating disorder. And then I saw your journey. I was like, okay, she needs to be on the podcast and we need to talk about eating disorders. I'm happy. Where are you? Because it's pretty early where you are.
Yes. So I'm located in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's why I was like, okay. You told me EST. I was like, I need to figure that out because in Europe it's just one time. So I was like, I need to be on time. I need to put my alarm and convert the time to make sure that I'm here on time. So, yeah. So today we're going to talk about eating disorder and your story, your advice, and your career as a eating disorder recovery coach. But before we dive into the story, I wanted to kind of do a little summary of eating disorder to give a few stats and to talk about what it is and why is it so important, at least for me, to talk about it. When I started the podcast, I had a list of topics that I wanted to touch on, and eating disorder was one of those topics. And so I'm just going to read a few things about eating disorder. They affect individual across demographics, across gender, across the world. And in order to help better, in order to understand their prevalence, we need to raise awareness around eating disorders. So since the year 2000, eating disorders has more than doubled worldwide. We are close to 10% of the population who is suffering or has suffered with an eating disorder, statistically in the US, but also in Europe, and honestly, everywhere else. Millions of people will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. It's not their might, they will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. Eating disorders have one of the highest mortality rates amongst mental illness. Is something that I discovered while I was doing research, with one death occurring every 52 minutes as a direct result of an eating disorder. The prevalence of eating disorders is highest amongst people between 16 and 40s. but cases have been reported in children as young as 6 and adults as old as 70. So we really have like a wide range. So eating disorder, they impact people across demographic, social, economical status, generation, profession, but also gender. And even though we perceive them as being predominantly affecting women, about 25%, even though I think it is more, I think that is more taboo for men, but 25% of those eating disorder cases are affecting men. So, yeah, it's really important to raise awareness, to talk about it, to get rid of the taboo around eating disorder. And I was curious because I wanted to start with your story, with your personal story to eating disorder. And can you take us back in time when that started for you and your relationship to eating disorder?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up as a dancer.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a dancer basically my whole life. I was a
Mm.
competitive dancer, so grew up in that world, and it was actually eating and body image. That was never a thing when I was growing up, which I'm really thankful for. That I had like a healthy childhood and everything with that. It was once I was in college, so I went to college for dance. And when I was there, I think it was really like I was in such a bubble and in such a routine where I was, all of my classes were dance. So I was dancing all day, every day. And then when I wasn't dancing, I was going to the gym, like to have this sense of control around like what I was going after to pursue this career in dance. Um, and that's kind of when it all started. It started out very innocently, which I think sometimes it does, in that I wanted to learn more about nutrition. I wanted to lose just a little bit of weight at first. And of course, that's a cycle that just keeps going. I just wanted to be like my best version of myself. And then it just kind of snowballed and kept escalating. And because I was in that bubble in college and in that routine, it was really hard to get out. And so it was very restrictive. It became very obsessive, and unhealthy, obviously. And so going through all of that, my professors at college started to notice that I was losing energy, that I was very underweight, and that they could tell a shift in like my personality and all the things, which I'm so grateful for them, and that they took the approach that they did, and where they like pulled me aside. We had like a little meeting of the
Mm.
sorts, and they were like, we noticed this, and I felt comfortable to talk to them, which is also amazing. Again, I'm so grateful for that. um, and they were basically like, we're going to take you out of performances and extra dance classes that you're taking this semester until you are better and in a more healthy state. Um, so I was kind of forced to make
Mm.
change. And I saw there was like a counselor on campus as well as a nutritionist. And honestly, at that point, I was like, I wanted to make change because I wanted to dance again, but I wasn't ready to actually make the changes in my behaviors and in my habits and that routine that I had cultivated. And I definitely wasn't ready to like talk about it with people that I
Mm.
didn't really know. So, especially with like the nutritionist, which I know this can be helpful for some, but for me, writing down everything I was eating and just being told that I needed to eat more carbs and more fats, like I already knew that. It was more so like, how do I
Mm.
get myself to do that because of all the thoughts that were going on? So I took it into my own hands, started reading all the books, listening to podcasts, journaling, like just getting
Mm.
really clear on my thoughts, talking to the people I trusted in my circle. And with that was able to make the change. Um, and so obviously that was a whole journey, a lot of trial and error and learning along the way. But eventually recovered. I moved to then New York City and pursued dance. I booked
Mm.
my dream job, and that was just such a full circle thing, since that is really what got me
Yeah.
through recovery, and then became an eating disorder recovery coach. So that's kind of
Yeah.
my story. Yeah.
Yeah, well, super inspiring, and I love that you had that full circle moment of being able to go back in, and that the eating disorder did not take that away from you. I mean, it took it away, but at least like it gave it back to you in
Yeah.
a way. And you talked about, it started as a healthy interest in your health, right? It started as which I think is the starting point a lot of the time. We want to be good, we want to feel good, and we learn about nutrition and how to eat better. But so it was like a slow, I feel like it was like a slow slope, a slow, going down very, very slowly. But on that way down, quote unquote, what were the signs? Can you go back and like identify some signs of like, oh, we're going from, we're jumping from a healthy interest to something that's becoming like
Hmm.
unhealthy?
Hmm. Yeah. I think the biggest thing was just the rules that I started creating for myself. So, for example, with like food wise, I was looking up like, different things about nutrition and wanting to eat really healthy, quote unquote healthy. And then that started becoming rules where I was like, okay, I always have to eat like the whole grain rice or the whole wheat bread, or I can only have, my big thing was like only have dessert like once a month, or like only on the
Mm,
weekends, like making all of these rules that were became so rigid that obviously that didn't feel good. And obviously also those rules created so many negative thoughts in my head, because then when it wasn't like a weekend and it was during the week and I was having dessert, then I made myself feel so guilty because I had that rule. um and so that with like food and even exercise too, it was like every time I exercised I had to be like doing cardio or like being doing like a hit
over
workout, like
exercising to kind of compensate.
yes, exactly. And like had to do it like a certain amount every day. And if I didn't, then I was bad. Or like all of those, like it's all of this creation of all of these rules. And with
Okay, it's when you started create a rule book for yourself, and if you did not follow the rule book, it would impact your mental health and behavior after that.
yes, absolutely. And I think it impacted
Okay.
in it in how I viewed myself, in that I felt better about myself if I was following the rules, and feeling less about myself if I wasn't, making myself feel all of that guilt and shame. Um, and also with like the compensation, like you said, of like, I earn this food, or like I deserve this food more when I exercise a certain way.
But did you ever feel better? Because sometimes you would hear people talk about their eating disorder journey. And yes, it starts with a healthy interest and then it starts becoming like problematic. But at some point, you don't even feel better, even when you follow the rules that you set for
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like at first, when you're first creating those rules and you're following them, you feel like really good about yourself, right? And that is kind of like what leads you into this like snowball, because when you put your worth and your value into things like that and those rigid rules, that's where it gets dangerous in
Hmm.
like having negative self-worth down the line, because those rules were not attainable and maintainable, really sustainable, all the things. So after like a few weeks even, like I couldn't like it was not realistic to follow those rules.
Mm.
And so then, when it was becoming really hard to follow those rules, but then if I didn't follow the rules, I felt terrible mentally about myself. Um,
Mm.
and then I think with recovery, what happens is we get into this routine of following these rules. And as humans, we love routine, and we fear change in a way. Like our minds are built
Yeah.
that way to fear change. So then it is so hard to change, even though the
Yeah.
rules aren't serving us. So then it's like yes, recovery is hard, but it's you have to look at this like big picture thing.
Yeah, no, and it's definitely worth it. But in terms of just in terms of time, how long were you caught in that cycle before someone noticed and was like, "Oh, hey, sit down,
Yeah.
let's have a chat."
Yeah, I think it was probably around like 6 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's yeah. So between the that's when you were in college. So when you
Mhm.
enter, and it's interesting because my journey was the same. Growing up, I grew up in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Body image was another thing. We have very different beauty standards in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
It's not much about like thinness and being very fit, etc. It's very different. It's a different culture, and it's when I moved to go to university to Montreal that things started to be a little like troubled water. And like you said, it started with a healthy interest, and then
Mhm.
it's like if you don't check on yourself and if you're not surrounded with the correct people, if you don't receive the right messaging, I feel
Mhm.
like you can end up very easily in a bad place, you know. And now
Yeah.
that you have kind of completed the cycle, even though I believe that it is a lifelong effort, if you could
Mhm.
go back to if you could say something to your younger self at like the height of your struggles, what would you say to her? What would you say to her at that moment?
Yeah, I think I would tell her that it's not about the food or your body. For me, it was a lot
Hmm.
about like wanting control around like my future and like perfectionism. And yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest thing I've learned.
Yeah, I love that because you wrote that you put that on your social media that it's not about the food, it's about control. And I talked to a sugar addiction expert in another episode, and she was saying the
Mhm.
same thing, the fact that the sugar addiction it's a
Mhm.
symptom, it's a band-aid. It's not about the sugar per se, it's about what you're trying to like numb or to
Mhm.
avoid. Um,
Mhm.
so you would agree also for eating disorder, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that our eating disorder behaviors are serving some kind of need. And there's lots of different things, but usually it is like this need for control, or whether it's like a perfectionism thing, or if it is like a self-worth like value and wanting to fill that in a way. Um I think those are the biggest things, and even just like helping with that fear of change, just change in life. And I think that then like funnels into the fear of our body changing.
Mm.
Those are like the main ones that I usually see.
Because and I think that if you try to resolve the eating disorder by only focusing on food, it may not be the most, I don't know, not helpful but long lasting way.
Yes.
It's like what are you trying to control, or where do you feel out of control in your life? What are you trying to for me it was very much that I was 17 years old. Well, at that point I was 18. I turned 18. You know, I was 18 years old
Mhm.
in this new big country. I knew no one. It
Mhm.
was a brand new, you know, when you go to college or to university, it's a brand
Mhm.
new, like everything changes, right? It's another world. And so I think that I was trying to take control of what I could. And what I could was going to the gym extensively, way too much, way too often, eating, being in charge of my groceries, being in charge of my groceries and my like
Mhm.
workout, you know. But when you don't go at the root and when you're just trying to eat better, you don't even know why you try to eat better. You know, it's so easy to then fall back again and you start hating yourself because you know your body changed, etc., etc. So I love the fact that you put the emphasis on the fact that an eating disorder is the symptom. It's not necessarily the I mean, there's something at the root of it. And I love the fact that you are a dancer because I love dancing. Dancing is a part of my life. I've also
Mhm.
danced for many years, not professionally, but um,
Mhm.
I've also danced. But I thought to myself, it must have been like a double-edged sword, right? Because dancing, particularly the kind of dancing that you're doing, is a lot about body, whether we want it or
Mhm.
not. You know, if we're talking honestly. And I was wondering, as a dancer, your body was under constant scrutiny. So how did that impact your self-esteem and your eating disorder? And also, what kind of dancing do you do? Just I didn't mention it, but
Yes, yeah. So, I do like every bit of dancing. I think like growing up in like the competition worlds, that was a big like positive in that it trained me in many
Mm,
styles. I danced with the Radio City Rockettes for 2 seasons, so that was like my I loved it so much, and that is like my favorite probably. But I think how it impacted is it definitely had a part in my eating disorder, especially in college. And like all of the control stuff aside, because that was for sure huge with that creation of it all. But it was also like I wanted to eat healthy, I wanted to lose the weight to be the best dancer that I could be, and
yeah.
I my brain tied those together. It was
Mm.
like if I do this, follow all these rules, I will get better as a dancer. And I think what I didn't realize during that time was I was getting better as a dancer. But
Mm.
it's not because of all of those rules and the eating disorder. It was because I was training and dancing and getting older and like so I definitely connected those in my brain, but now being years out I can see like no, I was just
Oh, you
practicing.
you connected your eating habit, your new, bad eating habit, quote unquote, with you becoming better. So you made that connection. For you, it was okay. I see what you mean.
Yes. And that was at first, right?
Yeah.
Because and I think that just like fueled it at the beginning. Like
Mm.
it started this fire. And then obviously then it's got to a point where it wasn't helping me because I was taken out of dance, and I was like,
Mm.
okay, well, if I can't dance, then I'm definitely not going to get better. So the thing that has to change is these eating disorder behaviors and habits. But I think in the world of dance, it is like because I was in such a bubble at the time in college, like I was dancing with the same people every day
Yeah.
and looking at all of those bodies, right? And
Yeah.
like that comparison. And that definitely fueled a lot of it where I was like, okay, I don't know. My big thing was I wanted like six pack abs. And that was like my thing. And my body is just genetically not made to have six pack abs very naturally. So I had to lose a lot of weight, of body fat, all the things. And so that was kind of like my journey. And like I set that goal and I was like, I'm going to get that related to like my body. And then I think after being recovered and like also being in the dance world, especially living in New York City, I was dancing with different people every day, seeing so many different bodies. And
Okay.
I think that's where the shift happened, where I was like, yes, dancers are seen for their bodies, but we are also, it's so much more than that. And how can I
Yeah.
shift it to the shapes I'm creating and also just this message that I'm sending to an audience, right? Like I danced in like a Christmas show and the Christmas show was just it was to spread joy to the audience, and like that is what the audience is there for, not
Yeah.
to like stare at our bodies. It's to
Absolutely.
I think now especially being through everything I've been through, I can now appreciate it for the movement itself and not
Mm.
just the image.
That's powerful because then dance becomes about dancing, like really the expression of joy, and it's not about what you look like. So it's by being exposed by a different kind of body. Because I assume, I mean, I don't know when you went to college, but I assume that social media was a thing, and going
Mhm.
back to being around all of those bodies, but also going on social media, and I assume your icons or your professor, the people that you are looking up to, you
Mhm.
envy what they have and you want to be at their level, so you think that you have to do all these things to achieve
Mhm.
what they have, right? But like you said, it was not about the eating. It was because you were training, you were getting better because you were
Mhm.
training over and over and over again, and that's you're just good at what you do. So um but you did mention that you felt lonely though during that time. But it seemed like you were surrounded, like you had friends and colleagues and people around you. Where was that loneliness coming from?
Mhm. Yeah, so at first it was really great. When I first went to college and was meeting all of these new people, and we were in like that dance department, and it does become like a family in a way. But I
Mm.
think actually the eating disorder then isolated me and brought me
Hmm.
that loneliness, in that since I had created all of these rules, I was saying no to a lot of things socially in my social life, like going out to eat or just hanging out because I had to be at the gym, and all of
Yeah.
these rules that were making me miss out on that social life and that social aspect. So it did make a lot of friendships like dwindle away, especially when I was in the thick of it. And I think that's when the loneliness set in, which is just, it's such a cycle because it was like brought on by the eating disorder itself.
Yeah.
And then I think eating disorders thrive in isolation.
Mm.
And so that was definitely a big part of it too.
And you feel bad, so you don't want to go out. Like sometimes when I feel bad, I'm
Right.
like, don't I don't if I feel like crap, I don't want to see people. I don't want people to see me, even though they won't see what you see. They will not look at your belly or your thighs or your arms. They will not look at that. They just want to spend time with you, right? But you get into that cycle of your mind where it's like, well, I cannot show up if I don't look good, even though you look good. I promise that you do, but in your psyche, right? In all of us, because I do believe that eating disorder is something that is affecting a lot of people. The statistic that I gave, and I'm going to give more statistic in the introduction, but I do believe that it's more than that. It is under wraps, and I wanted your opinion on that. Because my belief is that eating disorder is a spectrum, and there's the very maybe extreme, quote unquote. I'm not an expert, so sorry if I say the wrong thing, but we see bulimia or binge eating or anorexia, very like the Tumblr era of eating disorder, which if you are on Tumblr, you know what I'm talking about. But I feel like it's a spectrum, and there's the mild version of feeling bad when you eat something, or thinking that eating another piece of cake will make you gain weight, and therefore feeling bad about that, feeling anxious, feeling fearful of what you eat, and going out with friends and having a good time and eating whatever's there and then feeling bad. I feel like there's also like, I don't know, a thing of eating disorder. I feel like it's a spectrum, right? And it starts very mildly. So I wanted your opinion as a recovery coach. Do you also think that it's a spectrum, or is it very narrow?
Yes, it absolutely is a spectrum, at least in my eyes, right? I think in like with like diagnoses in general, they have to have like very specific guidelines with that.
Yeah.
But for me and like the people I help, I'm like, listen, this is definitely exactly what you said. You hit it right on the nose, in that it is a spectrum and just disordered eating in general. And I think that's like, that this is so
Yeah.
important to say, because so many people don't get help because they don't think that it's not bad enough.
Yeah.
And so I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't need to be diagnosed with an eating disorder to get help.
Yes.
If you have any negative thoughts and it's impacting you in any way, that is enough. And so I think that this idea that it is a spectrum is so important to share with the world, because that will just help people to get help and like to talk about it and to get better.
And just touching on that, what would you say to someone who maybe is afraid of asking for help? To someone who is, maybe they sense that something is wrong with their relationship with food, but again, maybe they're
Mhm.
not anorexia, they're not diagnosed with anything. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is to talk to someone, and even if that's just like your closest friend or family, because you will feel less alone. I think that's a big
Yes. Yes.
barrier in getting help, because you do feel just alone and that no one will understand. And I know I felt that way even when I was talking with like professionals and like knowing I needed help. I was
Mm.
like, no one understands. And that's a big part of why I do what I do, is that this doesn't have to be a taboo thing. Yes, so valid that
Absolutely.
it is. it's hard to talk about, but once you make that jump and like just talk to someone about it, you will realize almost everyone has had, whether it's just one thought around food, body, exercise, almost everyone has. And I think that that thought of you are not alone and there are people who understand makes a huge help.
That is so, so important to understand that you are not alone, and every single person at some point has had, across gender, has had a thought about food, exercising, etc., etc. I remember growing up as a kid, even though I did not have problem with body image, all of that started when I moved to Montreal. Still, the adult around me, the aunties around me, they're always drinking some type of like weird mixture that comes in a plastic bottle that's brown, and it's supposed to make you thin or whatever. Like there's also like diet culture is like imbued in our lives where we're raised, right? Of course, social media, but before social media was like magazines. I remember how horrendous it was. And looking back, I'm like, this is horrendous. We used to have magazines, and literally on the cover, you have an actress or someone, and they would zoom on a part of her body that has cellulite or whatever, like or like 1% fat, and zoom in and being very like, oh my God, she's letting herself go, and all of that is a messaging that gets imprinted in your mind, and it's so important to understand that you are not alone, and we need to get rid of the taboo. Like you say, it's okay to seek help. And on your journey, how so some people came to you, right? Or did you go out and seek help, or people were like, no, sit down? So people came to you. It's people who saw you, right?
Yes, yeah.
They came to you and they were like, here's I mean, you need you need help. But what if someone does not have that? That's the thing, right? What if someone is in their own, or they refuse to hear it,
Mhm.
or like they refuse to hear that they need help? What could be the signs that
Mhm.
it's time for you to ask for help?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to look at is how much of your day you're spending thinking about food, your body, exercise, right? We are made
Mm,
to think about so much more in life. Like life is so much more. So that's a big thing of, how much are you thinking about this? And especially if it's negative, that's a big
yeah,
sign as well. I think if people are like on the fence of like, not wanting to change, which I get it. I was there too. And again, I'm so grateful that people were in my life where they're like, we're not letting you move forward unless you make change.
that's
Um,
amazing.
especially in the dance world. And, that my professors were like, no, we're not going to stand for this. I'm so grateful for that. But I think if that's not the case and it's like the individual that has to, step forward if they want change, thinking about all of the ways it is negatively impacting your life. And there are many. And I think that sometimes we just close ourselves off to thinking about that.
Yeah,
And if that's hard of like thinking about the negative ways it's impacting now, think about the positives that could come if you got help or if you did recover. And in this, it's really important to think big picture because at first it is going to be hard. Like any change, it is hard, but you have to think of like the rest of your life compared to the next however long it's going to be, 6 months, a year, 2 years, compared to the rest of your life and like the freedom that you'll gain from that.
yeah. It's choosing better for the rest of your life, not just for tomorrow and the day after that. It's making the choices that will impact you long term. And I would also say, on social media, like your account is amazing when it comes to that, right? It's great to follow people like you and to see you talk about it openly, and to see what a healthy relationship to food look like or could look like, to know, because I feel like we are surrounded with bad examples, right? So if you just see that, you don't even know what you can do. And so, but on your journey, how did you rebuild how did you go from unhealthy, how did you build a healthy relationship with food, with your body, with yourself? How did you rebuild that?
Yeah. Yeah. So many things. I think, like you said, turning towards the resources that are what you want. So the people talking about like food freedom and like having the dessert and all of the things,
Yeah.
to show you what's possible, right? And like that is so important. I think that just journaling out my thoughts helped me so much, especially in the beginning, because
Mm.
I was at the point where I was just turning my thoughts off in a way because I didn't
What do
want
you
to.
mean?
I I think I just like I was so in a routine of like I eat the same foods every day. I do the same
Hmm.
things every day. So
Okay.
I got to a point where like
You disassociated almost of like you were
yes.
on or you were on autopilot.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Autopilot is an amazing way to say it, in that I yeah, and like my thoughts were just in the so back in my mind, you know? So
Yeah.
I had to get very very open and honest with myself in like actually how I was feeling.
Mm.
And so journaling helped me a lot with that, talking to the close people in my life about that, and just opening up and like getting it out.
Yeah.
And I think that was a big catalyst for the change for me too. Um, and just reading books, listening to podcasts of, you know, kind of like we said, of just other people who have been through it and to hear their journeys. And then I started like making these connections with my what I was going through, because sometimes when you're going through it, it's hard to be like, oh, I have an eating disorder, or oh, this is why this is happening. So listening to others' stories and,
Yeah.
you know, just
Absolutely.
learning more helped me kind of connect the dots in a way. And then really it was just holding myself and having those close people in my circle to hold me accountable to challenging fear foods and to changing my behaviors and my routines around everything.
Yeah, that's how, yeah, that's exactly, and it's so powerful the moment you put your thought out. And I think to talk to yourself out loud about it, because as long as it's in your head, you make sense of it. But once you start talking to yourself, you will realize how crazy and insane and how bad your relationship with food is, right? Because it's things I think you will never say to your friends. If your friend come to you with your meal plan, you'll be like, okay, this is starvation, this is not good, please stop. So I feel like the moment, talk to yourself about what it is that you're doing and say out loud the things that you think about food, and you realize, oh my god, ooh, this is unhealthy. And just know that there is a better world. Just know that you've probably accumulated a lot of bad messaging. And I wanted to talk about the messaging, right? What role do you think social media plays, I mean social message plays
Mhm.
into eating disorder? And do you think that we're getting better or worse?
I think the better or worse is hard
It's
because I
hard
think
because that's why I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if we're getting better or worse. I truly don't know.
yeah, because I think it depends on who you're following, right? And like your
Yeah.
algorithm. Um, because like for me personally, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great because I'm following a bunch of
Yeah.
people who are on the same like wavelength.
Mm.
Um, but then of course I hear about the other side of things too, and I think diet culture messaging and marketing is still there. I don't know if that will ever go away, but like
Yeah.
I tell people is that you have to see, especially on social media, if someone is selling something, then they are going to use whatever marketing terms that are
Strategies.
going to sell the product. So I'm like, if they're selling a product, you know, maybe we just swipe past it because that is what diet culture is. They are selling a bunch of products. So I think, yeah, better or worse, I think it's probably a little bit of both, but the cool thing is that you can cultivate that. It takes it takes the time, and like it takes that awareness and that accountability for yourself to scroll past something if it's
Yes.
not going to serve you. um I think that for me too it is, and for a lot of people that I am always reminding them of this, is that you have to know that social media, you never know the full story. even in real life, you never know someone's full story. So they might be posting a picture and you're drawing all of these conclusions in your head, but you have no idea their
You create a
relationship.
scenario in your mind. You create a scenario in your
Yes,
mind. Mm.
exactly. And you think
Mm.
that then you can obtain that for yourself, but you have no idea how they're eating, what their relationship with food is, what their relationship with themselves is.
Which
You
app
have
did they
no
use to
idea.
modify the picture if they did? Like it's
Yes.
you don't know anything. And I'm saying that because I know for a fact that you can hear the ambulance. Sorry, I don't know what's happening. Berlin is crazy. Never mind. Um, I know for a fact that social media played a huge role because I there was a moment where Instagram was all about like fitness influencer. All of a sudden, when they discovered Instagram, it was like, oh my god! And I know that that played a role. But what is very interesting to see, it's now all the people that were big back then coming back and being like, oh, that was eating disorder. I had an eating disorder. Like this is bad. This was I was, and it's so interesting to see that now. It's after years and people following them and praising them and trying to reach what they have, and these people coming out and being like, I was eating disorder, I was not eating well, I was over exercising, that was bad, like now I have to rebuild my whole relationship to food and to my body. And so that's why when it comes to social media, I don't know if we're getting better or worse. I know that it was very bad. I
Mhm.
think that maybe the saving grace is diversity. The fact that now we talked about body positivity, and you can find people of all shapes and all sizes doing all kinds of sports, right? I think that's kind of the better. But
Mhm.
also the worst is that it becomes more and more like subtle. It becomes there's so many ways to lie. There's so many ways to sell things that it becomes more and more. It can be like tricky to know what's real, what's fake, and who to trust, who not to trust. But
Mhm.
like you said, trust your discernment. Believe in yourself. Take accountability and make the right decision. What feels right at that moment. And if you need help, then ask for ask for help, right? And I wanted
Mhm.
to talk about the period that we are in because it is the holiday seasons. It is Christmas.
Mhm.
And I think that is a moment for eating disorder to like maybe thrive. I mean, I feel like there is
Mhm.
something between eating disorder and the
Mhm.
holidays. How do you navigate that? How do you help people navigate that? And what does that mean, holidays and eating disorders?
Yeah. Yeah, I think holidays are really hard. I know that they used to be the hardest time for me. I think it's
Mm,
because, well, of course, like the different foods, and it is very food centered, and being like out of routine, right? And so, you're going to all of these events and parties that have all these foods, and then, that's a change in routine too. So
mm,
there's a lot going on, and then of course it's like
yeah,
being around, maybe whether it's family or friends, and like
yeah.
comments can be made. So I
Mm,
think the biggest thing is that you have to, like anything, stay true to yourself and
yeah,
know what feels good for you. And I think that, of course, that can be hard to discover, but just asking yourself, like, what sounds good in the moment, and knowing that restriction never serves. So if you're making these rules for yourself, like, oh, I can only have like one cookie, or like only eat the cookies at this time, like whatever it
mm,
is, if you're making these rules for yourself, like the way that mental restriction works is that if you tell yourself you can't have something, you're going to be thinking about it the whole time. And I
mm,
think that holidays can be really hard, but also really helpful in that while it can be food centered, it's also very centered around like being with the people you love, and like being more focused on what you are grateful for, like these feelings of gratitude. And I think that yes, we can focus on the food, but we can also have an equal focus on all of those other things as well. So
mm.
if you're restricting the food, even just mentally, like putting these rules on it, then you're just going to be thinking about the food, and that's going to take away from the memories that you can be creating. So I really like to think, like, in 5, 10 years, like, what do you want to
Yeah.
remember about these
About that
holidays?
time, yeah. And I also
Exactly.
feel like the holidays, yes, I feel like they can be very triggering. I know that for me, because it's particularly this type of holidays, right? It's about food, it's about community, it's about community, and I remember it was very hard because I was in a very restrictive relationship when it comes to food. Like I think a lot of people, like I think a lot of women and men. But also at the same time, because it is so much about food and happiness and joy, I feel like the bad messaging is a little quieter than in summer, for example, where it's really about, like, summer is all about your body, right? When I feel like Christmas, I mean, the end of the year celebration, it's more about joy and happiness and food, and you can feel more free. When the rest of the year it's all about like body and lose weight and working out. Even the funny videos of what does a gym look like in December, it's empty because it's not a that's not where we are at. Like we are somewhere else. And so I feel like the holidays can be very triggering, but exactly like you say, it can also be a great time to free
Mhm.
yourself from the pressure of like diet culture. And could you talk about diet culture, because we did mention it, but it just occurred to me that maybe not everyone know what it means, even though for sure you've I mean you've we live in it, but we don't necessarily know what it is. So can we talk about diet culture, what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really think that diet culture is this, it kind of is like an industry of its own, in that
Mm,
it's created to sell products, whether that is like a product to promote like weight loss, or like any kind of like cleanse detox drink that you see.
mm-hmm.
um Even like, I think fitness, I think that can be a world of its own, but also part of diet culture. So any kind of like different like fitness program that's specifically around weight loss, really, diet culture has this belief that losing weight and being the smallest version of yourself possible is the answer to everything.
Mm,
Whether that's like health, happiness, value, all of the things. That is really what diet culture like lives by,
okay.
is just this sense of weight, and a lower weight is better, which is not the case. And I think really it is this like business and this industry where they thrive off of that marketing to sell products.
Yeah, and I saw a post that you made, and that I learned also from that. I'd like to talk about some misconceptions that we have about not just eating disorder, but also food. I remember you made a post talking about the harmful messaging of diet culture, and you wrote, "Your body is made to detox on its own. You don't need a powder greens drink to do so. Foods that are made carb free are just going to leave you hungry. Your body cannot absorb nutrients without a source of fat. Fat is great, people. Low calories is not always good for you. The more you restrict a food, the more you'll think about it." Can you talk about some of the misconceptions about food that you see in your work, and that you work with your client and you're like, okay, this is not true. You need to get that out of your, but you see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is this label of what foods are good and what foods are bad, or what foods are healthy and what are unhealthy. And again, those labels come from diet culture, because they're trying
Mm,
to sell you certain foods, right? So of course they're going to say like, "Oh, these are good and these are bad." And of course, like learning from that, like we then create the labels for ourselves.
yeah.
But I think that's the biggest thing, and I always say like, that is not true, and that is how we create these negative thoughts in our mind. When we have a food that we have labeled as bad, of course we're going to feel bad mentally around that.
Yeah.
And so coming from this view that all foods are neutral, that's where we can feel a lot more
Mm,
free. And I think that with this idea of a certain food being unhealthy,
yeah.
because yes, so like the example of sugar, right? Or like just dessert in general. Obviously, like people are going to say, like, you can't tell me that dessert is healthy. But I'm like, my perspective is that nutrients are important, but enjoyment is just as important. to our body. If we don't
Mm.
have satisfaction, our body cannot like move on with the day, right? Like if you've ever had like
Mm-hmm.
a meal and like you might be like physically full, but it's just like missing that one thing. And then you're still thinking about food and you can't like move on. And then maybe you go have like a little piece of chocolate and then you're like, oh, okay, now I'm like satisfied in that, whatever it is for you. So that just goes to prove that satisfaction is just as important to the body as nutrients are. And so some foods have more nutrients, some foods have more enjoyment, and some foods have both. And so with things like dessert, okay, maybe it is like mostly enjoyment, but that is important too. So I think that's the biggest thing I try to teach people.
Yeah, because what I love on your page, and this is where I struggle, is it's moderation. You can eat
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of everything in moderation. Now, me, not good with that. Again, I'm gonna wait for I don't know what's going on. Berlin. Yeah, that's where I struggled with because it was to learn how to eat in moderation. The fact that I can eat a little bit of everything in moderation. To be fair, when it comes to sugar, though, I do have a bad relationship with sugar. That is, I had to acknowledge that I ate way too much sugar, but I can eat it in moderation, right? And it's not about the food itself. It's
Mm-hmm.
about what you do with the food, or how you consume the food, or how do you perceive the food.
Mm-hmm.
If you need 5 Ks to feel happy, maybe there's a little problem. Like maybe it's all, maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's all depend on how do you consume it. Is that am I understanding it correctly?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a really good point too, is that especially going with this dessert thing, this like example of like ice cream, is that yes, the enjoyment is a factor and we can see that that can be healthy in a way, but then I always get the comeback of like, okay, but how is it healthy to like, it wouldn't be healthy to eat ice cream all the time, right? And I'm like, yes, but would it feel good to have ice cream for every single meal of every single day? And maybe for a couple of days it might be really
Yeah,
fun,
maybe at first.
right? Yes, but eventually it's not going to feel good. As someone who
Mm.
loves ice cream, I can say that because your body needs other things,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
it needs the protein, it needs the nutrients, like it also wants that, and our bodies are built and designed to know that and to want that. Like you have the ice cream for like 3 days straight, you're going to crave a vegetable, probably.
Yeah,
And
you're
that's
gonna be tired
all,
of it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And that's all to
Mm.
feel good, to feel energized, to be able to live life and feel good. Like I always come back to that, like feeling good.
Yeah, feeling good to thinking good and to acting good, etc., etc. And I love the fact that you're talking about the wonders of our bodies, because yes, indeed, your body will tell you, okay, I'm sick of this ice cream now. Please
Hmm.
take that away from me and eat one green thing, please, I beg of you, right? And if but it requires you to be able to listen to that body, right? To listen to yourself and be like, okay, now it's time for me to put down the ice cream, or now it's time for me to actually pick up the ice cream. I want ice cream. I'm in the mood for it. But your body will know. Going back to what you say about your body is made to detox, we have a whole organ that is made for that has been created and crafted for that. Your body knows, and if you just listen to it, as much as you can, it will tell you where the balance is. I feel like, and this is what was hard for me, and I think it was rooted in the fact that I did not trust myself. When you don't trust yourself, you cannot trust your body, right? You're trying to control it because you don't believe in its capacities. But when I realized that my body will tell me when I'm hungry, when I'm craving something, when I don't want something, like your body will tell you. So trust yourself. And going back to what is very important for me, loving yourself, caring for yourself, listening to yourself, all of that is connected, because we do talk about food, but it's connected to your emotions and to your mindset, and it's you need to fix your I mean, to heal maybe your relationship with food, so you can have a better mindset, so you can have a better life, so you can go outside and build community and have fun and enjoy and dance and sing and do all these things, right? It's not just focusing on food all the time. It's not just being obsessed with it. That's the problem, I think. It's when you're obsessed with it. Um, and did you notice a difference in your, I assume yes, but what kind of difference did you notice in your thoughts before and after ED? For example, when you're eating a cake or when you're eating ice cream, what were your thoughts during the ED and what were your thoughts like after when you recovered?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is just that enjoyment level, in
Mm,
that when I was in the eating disorder and I maybe allowed myself to have
yeah,
a piece of cake or whatever it was still very conditional. And those thoughts were I just couldn't stop thinking about when while I was having the dessert. I would be thinking about the future. I was not present at all. I was
yeah.
thinking about, what I would be eating later, or the next time I could have dessert, or how much exercise I'd have to do. I was so future focused and trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Mm.
And now I can just enjoy the dessert and be present, and that that helps you enjoy it so much more.
And taste it, honestly taste it, like just taste the food. And I can relate so much because for me it was a lot of like eating to numb feelings or to stay in control, and so you focus on everything but the food. It's like you eat but you think about the thing that you are anxious about. I don't know, the thing at work or the essay that you have to write that you have not started, or the things that you said and like you regret, or that person, and it's therefore not about the food. It becomes about all the things that you try to escape, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like one of the biggest things I've gained from just healing and recovering is just this presence in everything in life, not just eating the food and actually being able to taste it and enjoy it, but also having this presence and being able to enjoy all the other things in my life. Like when I'm hanging out with friends, being able to be present in that experience and not be thinking about all of the other things.
Food should be a fuel to do all those things, to have fun, to be with your friends, to enjoy, to look at the world, to look at the sky, to look at the cloud, to dance, to sing. It should not be the center of of your life. And you are an eating disorder recovery coach. What do you see? Is there something that you see in your client that is repetitive, like a pattern or some? What do you notice?
Mhm.
What have you noticed on your in your career?
Yeah, I think a big thing I noticed, and I also noticed this within myself as well, is just this hyperfixation on food and on exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
a big thing that I learned was just this concept of holistic health, where our health is so much more than those two things, in that our creativity, our social life, our spirituality, our career or work, those are just as big of pillars as food and exercise are. And that's a huge thing that for me, I was so stuck in that, just food and exercise. Those were the two things that were going to help me
Mm-hmm.
be my best self, right?
Like
I
the
think that
key to happiness, to joy, you thought was and fulfillment, you thought it was food and exercise. Interesting. I think that's a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, especially like with my clients now, it's how can we add in all of the other things? And usually, when you add in other things that can help take, of course, like working on all of the thoughts and everything else behind it,
Yeah.
but that can also help with taking focus off of the food and exercise when you are pulling in like hobbies, social life, just talking to people, kind of what we were talking about before.
Yeah, and you realize that, I mean, once you pour yourself into something else, once I started tapping into my creativity, once I started having fun with life, I thought way less about my body and the circumference of my waist, and I felt better overall, right? When before it used to be an obsession. Like, how do I look? How do I look? How do I look? But then when you pour yourself into something else, when you focus on something else, you stop focusing on these things and you become so much better and you feel so much better and your body changes for the better. Like all of that will impact your body and yourself and everything. And I know that something that I would like to say to people, you should not live in a calorie deficit. I know that we love to talk about like calorie deficit. You should not live in a calorie deficit. It is not a way to live. the feeling of hunger when your stomach gargles. It's not, you should not thrive on that.
Mhm.
Um, going back to something that we talked about earlier, that's why I never mention anyone's body, whether I don't look at someone's body, whether they're losing weight or gaining weight. I don't mention it because you never know. Going back to what you said about sometimes when you are in your family, they can make comments.
Mhm.
Please don't comment, whatever it is. I'm always bothered when I see someone praising someone for losing weight. Personally, it's something that bothers me on social media or in real life. It's not necessarily always good. It's not necessarily always bad, but it is
Mhm.
not necessarily always good. So I wanted to say to people, be mindful of the comment, be mindful of the thought that you have on other people. I never mention weight gain or or weight loss. I know actually no physical changes. I don't look at your new hair. I don't look because you never know the story behind it, and it
Mhm.
can be. I feel like sometimes praising someone for weight loss, you never like it can be. I don't know,
Mhm.
a slippery slope. I don't know. To you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. Yeah,
It can.
you just
You never know.
never know. Yeah, you never know, and I think that also goes back to this idea that something that I see a lot is that people put so much, we're kind of taught to put a lot of value and worth into our bodies and our physical appearance. And
Yes.
with recovery, especially if you're coming from a place of restriction, your
Yeah.
body is going to change. And that's probably one of the hardest parts that I see people go through, is because so much of their worth and value is tied into their body, and now it's changing. So all of these things come up. So it is like when others make comments on your physical appearance, it is very validating to
Yeah.
someone who is going through it, because it emphasizes that their worth and their value is in that. And of course, people might not think that, like our families, our friends, they don't
Absolutely.
actually think that, that your body is more important, but an eating disorder will just run with that. And so it is like always going back to the other things that are so much more important about you, and the things that you
Mm.
value in life too, that are way more important than the body.
Then the body and the exercise and the treadmill and the over exercising and the and the joy that you feel after a hard workout because your body hurt and it's like like ugh. Um, but also something that I noticed is that some people may not be fat phobic in society, but
Mhm.
they are fat phobic towards themselves. You know what I mean? It's like they won't express anything or any ill will or bad thoughts for anyone when it comes to their body. However, we may have this internalized fat phobia where we don't want to be fat. Oh my God, it's the worst thing on earth. Oh my God, what if I gain weight? What if I become fat? It's like the worst thing on earth. It's like, actually, no. And so when it comes to fat phobia, we talk about it as this external thing that we're putting on people, but I would invite people to be like, what is your own internalized fat phobia to yourself? Are you fat phobic to yourself? Maybe, maybe not your friend. I understand that, but maybe you have this internalized, I don't know, messaging of like being fat is the worst thing on earth. And unfortunately, I feel like little girls, we are raised that way. And I'm going to get someone on the podcast to talk about the men's side, but since we are,
Mhm.
I feel like little girls, we're kind of raised that way, unfortunately. And I wanted to talk to you more about like the support, the support part, right? If you know someone who is going through an eating disorder, like people around you, they noticed it, right? If you want to help them, how can you support someone without causing more harm towards them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just being there and being like, if you want to talk, like, I am here. I think that that is the biggest resource, and just knowing like you can trust me. I think if you've gone through something like many people have, like, or even just like any thoughts around food, like that can be really helpful, kind of what we were saying, of just not, making sure the person doesn't feel like they are alone, and that they have someone who understands. But also not like pushing or anything. And I also do want to say, like, some comments around like eating disorder things, like saying like, oh, you look sick, or just certain things can be very validating for an eating disorder. Like, I
Validating.
think,
You look sick can be
yes,
validating. Can you expand on that?
yeah, absolutely. So I think that when someone is in an eating disorder, their eating disorder self will take that and like run with it and be like, I think it becomes validating because it is, well, it's validating to the eating disorder self, but it also becomes
Interesting.
this sense of attention. And sometimes that is what people are seeking through this, and that sense
Mm.
of like worry, which again turns into attention. um and I've heard that from so many people. They're like, when people tell me I'm sick, or that, I should get
Mm.
help, like, that validates my eating disorder so much that I want to like stay in it. And what I say to that is that, you can get attention in so many other ways. Your people will care about other things besides you being sick. They will care about how your day was, or that project that you're working on, or what you're doing with your friends. They will care about that, and you can find that attention in other ways.
Interesting. I'm gonna think about it because I never made the link
Mhm.
between eating disorder and like a thirst or quest for attention. Like it's something that I've never. I thought it was very like personal. It's between you and yourself. But I'm gonna think about the fact that it may be also a way for you to get attention, compliment. May they be positive or negative, apparently, because feeling
Mhm.
sick may not be positive, but you do get the the attention. And so before we go, I wanted to ask, for now that you have recovered and you've helped people on their way, can you talk about what does a healthy relationship to food look like? Just to give people like, what does it look like once you've recovered? What can they
Yeah.
aspire to?
Yeah. I mean, it's the best thing ever. I think that it is like, it's knowing how foods make you feel and being able to tune
Mm.
into that, so that, again, the end goal is to just always feel good. But it's enjoying food, and it's enjoying all of the other things in life even more. Probably, food is there to fuel your life and to be this sense of joy and like enjoyment, but also
Yeah.
there's so much more to life, and it's really freeing to not have those rules and to not beat yourself up about any of that, and to just use it to support and lift you up.
Yeah, to feel good, to be good, and when you feel good, you look good. And looking good has nothing to do with actually how you look, but it's how you feel, right? It's whatever it is that you look like. If you feel good, you'll feel confident, you'll feel beautiful, you feel all of these things, and the world around you will change. That's also something that when you start feeling good, when you start thinking better, I'm a huge believer in the power of your mind. And if you start changing all of these things, all of these roots in your mindset, then the world will look better. Then you will attract even more compliments, even more, better compliment, better conversation, better people, etc., etc. And so, yeah, thank you so much for accepting to sitting down with me. If you have words of, would you, as a recovery coach, would you have words of encouragement for anyone who feel maybe hopeless or trapped, or they're now realizing that, oh my God, my relationship to food is actually bad? What
Mhm.
what would you say? What words of encouragement would you say to someone who's listening, who's like, oh God, I might need to make changes, but if that means that my body will change, I'm terrified. If that means that I will maybe become fat, honestly, right? What would you say to someone like that right now?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is that change is scary, yes, but that doesn't mean it's wrong or that it's
Mm,
impossible. I think
yeah.
knowing that there are other people who have gone through it, um including myself, who now are on the other side of it, shows that it is possible and it's worth it. So those are the things I always say: it's possible and it's worth it.
It's possible and it's worth it. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I know that it is a lifelong process, and it can take even years to realize that it was an eating disorder. Like we say, it's a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Accept if someone tells you maybe you need help, accept it, open yourself to it. Like you said, like what happened to you, you were blessed enough to have people who were like, okay, we need to do something about that, right? Also, if you see someone if you see some eating disorder in your friends, in your family, first maybe gain information on how to talk to them, but do something, see something, say something. Food should not be the center of your life. You're worth more, way more than that. Tap into other things. And yeah, I think this is how. Do you want to add anything else? But I think that this is.
No, everything you just said was amazing. I love it.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for saying yes. I will, of course, I will give people all your social. Tell people where they can find you and what do you offer as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a coach, I offer my program Restriction to Freedom. It is virtual sessions, either weekly or bi weekly, and also with that 24/7 messaging support. So, while you're living your life and those challenges come up, I'm right there to help you through it. But you can find me at your_spoonful on Instagram and TikTok.
I'm gonna link that everywhere on the screen in the bio. I don't know how that, everywhere, marketing, all of that. I'm gonna do that. Thank you so much, Ali. Your Instagram is very inspiring, and if I do have a hard time with food, I'm gonna constantly go back to your Instagram. It is like a real source of like joy and hope in a way, to know that to know that you can have a healthy relationship to food, to know that that exists. I encourage people to follow those kind of accounts and follow everyone that is negative. And yes, thank you so much for taking a seat with me. Have an amazing, amazing day. Your day is starting, my day is ending. So have a great start of your day. And yeah, if you ever want to come back on the podcast, if you want to talk about anything, please feel free to reach out. It's the platform for that.
Yes, thank you so, so much for having me. I love chatting with you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.